Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ask Kati Anything. I'm your host, licensed marriage and family therapist, Kati Morton. I'm so glad that you're here. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about a lot of things. First up, high functioning depression, what it really looks like, what it can feel like, and kind of how we should know we need more help. I'll also talk about why we can feel stagnant in life. Even if we want to grow, we can feel like we sabotage our own progress. I'll talk about how abuse affects our memory, why our anxiety can cause us to itch and shake. And then I'll explain why a parent being away from home a lot when we were growing up can affect our attachment. And finally, why we sometimes have to grieve the loss of therapy and how do we do that. Without further ado, let's jump into question number 1. This question says, hey, Kati, could you talk about high functioning depression and what it really looks like? For context, I feel like I have a quote unquote perfect life. Supportive parents, a stable home, pets, a car, and all the basic things I need to live comfortably. I haven't experienced any trauma, and from the outside, everything seems fine. But on the inside, I feel deeply unhappy and empty. I deal with depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts almost daily, self-harm, and some OCD-like tendencies. Because I'm still able to go to school, hang out with friends, and function pretty well, it often feels like my sadness is a choice, or like I'm being selfish or dramatic for feeling this way when I know things could be worse. I struggle with a lot of guilt around feeling this way. And I constantly question whether my feelings are valid. My questions are, what is high functioning depression and how is it different from other types of depression? Can someone still be deeply struggling even if nothing bad has happened to them? And why do I feel guilty for feeling sad? And how do I work through the belief that I don't deserve to feel this way? And finally, what are some ways to cope or begin healing when you feel like your life is fine on the outside but painful on the inside? Thank you for everything, Kati. Of course. Okay, great question. The first thing I want to address is the fact that our depression does not have to have a situational cause, meaning we don't have to have something in our environment that has happened to create our depressive symptoms. For most of us, our depression comes from things like genetics or differing levels of neurotransmitter activity in our brain, or having activity in our brain be different in one area versus another. I don't know if you saw those brain scans from a research study conducted probably 6 years ago now, but they did the scans of a brain with depression and the scans of a brain without, and certain portions of a depressed brain just are not functioning at the level that a non-depressed brain is. And so that lethargy, that brain fog, that difficulty making decisions, the inability to see any positive, that could actually be coming from lack of brain function in certain regions, okay? And I say all of that to say that, I know we want to have a why. I'm depressed because my girlfriend broke up with me. I'm depressed because I got in a fight with my sister. I'm depressed because we want to have that answer. And that's not always the case. For a lot of us, it has a genetic undercurrent, meaning someone in our close family, like a close relative, like a mother, father, sister, brother, had it or has depression, and now makes us more likely to have it. I want to say it's by 26% or so, it increases our likelihood of having depression. We have that undercurrent, and then it's possible that something happens in our environment that turns on that gene. They call that epigenetics. So something occurs and it triggers that gene to be turned on, and now we feel those depressive symptoms. Does that make sense? And so it's kind of like we could have that. That could be the setup. We have genetics and then something happens. But for some of us, it's purely genetic, or it's purely the way that our brain functions. And we can have a environmental cause, but for a lot of us, we don't. So I want to throw that out there first. Now, the questions that she actually asks are, what is high functioning depression and how is it different? Now, technically, high functioning depression is not a separate diagnosis in the DSM or the ICD-11. However, high functioning depression, from my perspective as a clinician, it's when we barely can do what we need to do in our week or our day, meaning go to school. Like this person said, they can go to school, hang out with friends, but we're barely hanging on. It feels like we're white knuckling life. And the way that I usually find this shows up with my patients and even members of our community is that we can do what we need to do during the day. And then as soon as we get home and we don't have to be around friends, we don't have to be around family, we get to our alone time, we're exhausted. We sleep. Weekends, if we don't have anything planned, we just want to sleep the whole time. We might not even want to leave our bed or our room or anything like that. We kind of crash out, for lack of a better term. And so That's really what high functioning depression is. It like also that white knuckling can look like us going to these events that we said we go to, like, oh, everybody at work's going to the happy hour. We go and we're like, we're having no fun. We're masking all the time. We're pretending we're enjoying things when we're not. And it's because that depression is kind of robbing us of that. And so that's why I think of this as like white knuckling depression, because you still have depression, most likely major depressive disorder would be the diagnosis. However, you're able to like through, brute force, like white knuckle your life and do what you need to do anyway. And that's really how it shows up. Now, the other types of depression, I would say that this is major depressive disorder. The only way I would say it's different from other types would be like dysthymia, which is like a low-grade depression that lasts for years and years. This would be, it could be dysthymia. It depends on the severity of your symptoms. And so really, I can't, high functioning really just means that we're white knuckling life. We're able to do what we need to do, just barely, but we often don't have any enjoyment in it. And we still feel very depressed most days. Okay. The question, can someone still be deeply struggling if nothing bad has happened to them? I feel like I answered that first up because it's really important to know bad things don't have to happen to us for us to feel bad. Okay. And then the question, why do we feel guilt? Why does the person feel guilty for feeling sad? And how do I work through the belief that I don't deserve to feel this way? The best way to untangle guilt is to question it. Now, what I mean by this is guilt is just a feeling, and feelings are not facts, okay? Guilt wants to tell us we're doing something wrong, but my question to you would be like, is feeling sad wrong? And if your automatic response is, yeah, feeling sad is wrong, it's bad, I shouldn't feel sad. Why? Who told us that? Why do we have that belief? Where does that correlation come from? That feeling sad is like bad and makes us bad. Like that's a strange connection. Because also this person said, like, I haven't been traumatized. I would argue if you've lived through COVID, which I'm assuming you're typing this, you have been alive since COVID, we were all traumatized. And I think we put trauma in this like on this, like, not pedestal. Let me sound like it's a great thing, but like that it's this big deal, that it's this huge thing that has to happen. But you have to remember that trauma means that something was terrifying to us. We feared for our own safety, the safety of someone else. And what took place was so much, it was so intense, I guess, that we didn't have the capability to process it in the moment. And as we, tried to go throughout our day, we still recall certain scenarios, certain pieces of what's happened. Now, remember, trauma doesn't mean we have PTSD. Trauma means we were traumatized. And I believe that you most likely have been or were at the very least through COVID. But going back to the guilty of feeling sad, there's something in here where it doesn't feel okay for you to struggle. And I don't know if you said, no, it doesn't say anything here. I was like, in my brain, I'm like, are you the parentified child? Are you the one that's like the most responsible in your family? I'm just curious about that because sometimes I find those of us who are like the eldest daughter or take on most of this stuff in our home, then when we aren't feeling good, we feel bad about it. Like we shouldn't feel this way, like that something's wrong. And the fact that you don't deserve to feel this way makes me wonder what would it look like to deserve it? Just out of curiosity. Where did that belief come from? And so instead of being mad and letting ourselves go down these like thought spirals about, oh, I'm such a bad person, I don't deserve to feel this way, I have so much going for me, blah, blah, blah. Instead of doing that, because that gets us nowhere, let's instead be curious, not judgmental about the process. What would it mean to deserve this? What am I guilty for? Did I do something wrong? When did I hear this? Why do I believe this? Right? Ask yourself those questions because I think this comes from a place that it really isn't yours to own, meaning I think someone else gave you those beliefs and you've accepted them as yours, but they're really not yours. And so now's the time to question them. And the final piece of this, what are some ways to cope or begin healing when you feel like your life is fine on the outside, but painful on the inside? You need to reach out for help. We need to get you into therapy. If they offer it through school, that's great, or work, whatever, however you can afford it, I would encourage you to do it. The best way, if you can't afford to do that, I think is through starting to journal. Remember, journaling doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be spelled correctly. You don't have to read it back. It's more a way for you to kind of figure out what you're telling yourself, what's going on inside your own head. And that gives you a place to start. So if we notice it's really negative, then maybe we try to work to look for some things to be grateful for, some positives in our life. If we find that it's really self-deprecating, we put ourselves down, maybe we need to work on our own self-talk. If we find that it's hard for us to journal at all, maybe we're disconnected. Maybe we need to just start tapping in, naming one feeling a day. Those are just some of the ways to start, because life can always look fine on the outside. Honestly, I don't really care what things look like on the outside. I know in our world with social media, we think, oh, if it looks good, that's all that matters. On Instagram, everybody's happy. No, I don't give any shits about that. I'd rather your Instagram look terrible and you be having a wonderful life, right? Because on the inside is what really matters. And for this person, if you're really having a hard time, I really want you to reach out and get some support from a professional. Okay. And they should have it at your school. I think this person said they're still in school. I got free therapy through college at Pepperdine. I also, continued it into grad school even. I went into therapy then too. Or, even at my high school and stuff like that, we had a school counselor who was a licensed counselor. I know not all are, but we also had a psychologist that would come around and see people each and every week. So look into those things too. Moving on to question number 2, it says, you know how frustrating it is when your hair starts thinning. I went through it during a really stressful time and I just thought I had to live with it. I tried everything, oils, masks, vitamins. Nothing made a real difference. That is until I found Vegamore's Grow Hair Serum. Vegamore is the leader in plant-powered, science-backed hair solutions. Their Grow Hair Serum has totally changed my routine. It's lightweight, super easy to use, just a few drops once a day on wet or dry hair, and after a few weeks, I started noticing less shedding and fuller, healthier hair. It's vegan, cruelty-free, and free from harsh chemicals, packed with plant stem cells, peptides, and phytoactives that actually work. In fact, 93% of users saw less shedding, and 90% said their hair looked better overall. I've subscribed to the jumbo size, so I never miss a day, because the key is consistency. If you're tired of hair shedding or thinning, take back control with Vegamore. Go to vegamore.com/Katie and use code Katie to get 20% off your first order. That's vegamor.com/Katie, code Katie. Moving on to question number 2, it says, I accept my flaws and I want to grow, but I zone out or give up easily. I've been stagnant in my studies for 3 years. How do I build real lasting change when it feels so hard to even begin? So much to unpack here. This is really common. I think of this as self-sabotage. I actually have a video coming out about this soon, so make sure you're subscribed. But when we find ourselves wanting things, but giving up easily or zoning out, we have to understand kind of why we're sabotaging. The most common reasons are our belief system. Like, we don't think that we deserve whatever it is that we're wanting. And so we create scenarios that prove that. Because remember, our brain looks for things to prove what it already knows. Because unknown stuff is kind of scary and overwhelming, and it doesn't really know how to make sense of it. And our brain loves patterns. It loves to make sense of things. And so it's going to look out if we think, oh, everything's going against us, nothing's going my way. Then on my drive into work, I'm going to notice all the red lights that I hit, all the times I have to stop. I'm going to notice the fact that, oh, I'm going to have to get gas on the way home. And that's going to be really frustrating. Or, oh shit, I forgot to pack a lunch. All that stuff's going to seem like a really big deal, and I'm going to focus on it. Because my brain is already looking for things to support the fact that today's a shitty day, right? If instead I tell myself, today's going to be a wonderful day, how amazing, then I notice, oh, it's so sunny today. Wow, so nice. Oh, I love the summer. I love that it's warm. I love that it's light when I get up and light when I go home. Oh, and then I'm like, man, it's so nice that I got to have enough gas to get to work. I would have sucked to have to get gas on the way to work. Or, oh, I didn't bring lunch. Oh, good. Maybe I'll ask that other girl at the office to go out to lunch with me. Do you see how different that life experience is? And we have that choice. And so when we sabotage, it usually comes from a place of belief that, like, I don't deserve good things. I deserve to have shitty days. I'm not good enough. I'm, so stupid, lazy, whatever. And so I want to challenge you to pay attention to the reasons that you do this. Why do we give up so easily? Are we afraid of failure? Is it because we always think we're not going to be good enough? Like, what are these messages? Okay. So that's a part of it. Then I also want you to know that we sabotage because we maybe are afraid of what it could do to our relationships. And I know that sounds kind of silly, and maybe this doesn't apply to you. These are just options, right? But sometimes we can be worried that like, hey, if I do really well, are people going to think I'm cocky or conceited? If I'm really successful, are people going to be jealous and then mean to me? Right? I've had thoughts like that. Like, oh, if I get really successful, are people going to start to hate me? I know that sounds weird, but we have those thoughts. I've had those thoughts. So be curious about why you give up. Like, what is it that why are we sabotaging ourselves? Because you're the only one standing in your way. And so let's be curious, not judgmental. It's no time for judgment. We judge enough to figure out where this is coming from. And then the second component, like, how do I build real lasting change? Well, once we understand why we're sabotaging, then we have to kind of manage those issues. Meaning, like, let's say the thing is I have these old beliefs about myself. How can I maybe journal or get into therapy to untangle them, to decide that I don't believe them and to fight back against them? Now, I'll speak personally. I really struggle with feeling like I have to earn my worth. I have to hustle to like gain love or attention or any of those things, all the things that I want, right? I have to really like work for it. If something comes easily, I'm like, this is suspicious, right? So I feel like I have to work and work and work and work and work. But I don't like that. That doesn't get me anywhere that I want to go. And it's actually kind of, it sabotages me sometimes because if something comes easily, I won't take it when I should. And so I have to challenge that. I have to know this about myself. And when something comes, I have to say, is this something that I would want to do? It feels so easy and nice. I feel like that's like, I'm working with the universe, right? I talk myself out of the sabotaging behaviors. Well, it's what I want to do. And wow, it just fell in my lap. That's wonderful. Yay. And I allow myself to celebrate and get excited. And I know that you're like, Katie, that sounds so weird, but that's how we get out of this pattern. We have to challenge that automatic thought or that sabotaging behavior. And we have to say, but does it seem okay? Maybe I could just be excited and happy. Maybe I could, instead of worrying about this lasting change and this big, real lasting change I'm going to make, I'm like, you know what, today I'm going to try to be a little bit more positive, and then I'm going to celebrate the fact that I was able to do that for half an hour, maybe half a day, maybe a full day. But either way, I'm going to celebrate the little wins. And so that's how I feel like the problem that might be kind of stopping you is that it's so hard to even begin, is that it feels like this huge undertaking when it's really a day-to-day thing. I'd love to tell you that, wanting to grow just is one decision and then we just grow and we don't have to think about it anymore. But it's a choice we make every day. And that's really where you're going to grow, is by making that choice every day when you get up to decide to tap in, not zone out, decide to push forward instead of giving up easily, not accepting these old beliefs about yourself and celebrating the small wins. Like, I didn't think negatively on my way to work, or I was actually really in a good mood for 2 hours today. Like, small wins, notice them, okay? And start journaling about them. That would keep you accountable. So every day come up with, 2 or 3 small wins. Moving on to question number 3, it says, hello. I've recently realized that there are a lot of things I do not remember about my childhood. My sibling was sharing some stories and kept looking at me asking, do you remember that? And I rarely did. We lived in the same house, so how does she remember so much more than me? I was the parentified child who watched everything from the outskirts and was terrified to cause any issues or really be seen. I was labeled as too sensitive a lot. My sibling was very loud and easily expressed their feelings, and that usually led to pretty significant physical abuse that I would witness. There we have it. There's the trauma. I feel like the physical abuse they endured was worse than what I went through, so why do I struggle so much more emotionally than they do? Because everybody's different. We'll talk about this. In addition, that isn't really fully related. Sorry, I hope it's okay. Of course it's okay. I recently had a therapist who got defensive when I told them how some things landed with me. Since then, I've been afraid to show up again. I'm afraid I'll be misunderstood again. I imagine that comes from the emotional neglect and isolation I received as a child, yes. But I don't know how to proceed from here. Any advice would be appreciated. Thanks for all that you do. Of course. Now, what happened growing up for you was that you were traumatized. You and your sibling both experienced trauma. And due to that, I would assume you probably dissociated. In dissociation, we often think, it has to be this big thing like, I feel like out of body, out of self. And it can for a lot of us. And it can last for days and weeks and sometimes as long as we need it to. But for more of us, it just feels like we're spacey, kind of in a fog. Almost that like I drove home and I don't remember how I got myself home thing. Or they're like, oh, wait, what did we do yesterday? I don't even remember. It can be that kind of spacey. And regardless of how you experience the dissociation, it definitely occurred because you have no memory. You're like, I don't remember this. And that's incredibly common. When we're traumatized, our brain will pull the ripcord on reality, pull us out a little bit to give us some space emotionally from what's happening. And when that occurs, we often do not form memory. Sometimes it's spotty, sometimes it's flashes, sometimes it's repressed and we can dig it up later. But in your case, it sounds like the memory just is maybe not there. And I know that's really frustrating, but the reason that this happens when you grew up in the same house, you went through the same stuff and you're like, they were physically abused and I wasn't as often. Really, I know this sounds crazy to say it, but it doesn't always matter. It's about the level of traumatization that we experience, which is unique to us, and our level of resilience. And resilience is our ability to weather life's storms, meaning when shit happens, can I ride it out? Do I have tools and skills and people, support to get me through? Each of us is born with a different level of resilience. Some of us are just naturally more resilient than others. And then some of us aren't, and we have to work at it. But it is something that can be built. And my guesstimation about your sibling would be that they probably have a big social net, are very expressive. So they talked about the trauma all the time. So they like processed it. And maybe you didn't, because you kind of thought you were too sensitive. So you probably stuffed it down. You probably repressed more than they did. And so that could be the difference right there. And so my encouragement for you is to build up more of that resilience. Do things to take care of yourself. Start building a social net. Make connections online or in person. Talk to more people. Get a therapist and things like that to help you feel more supported, feel like you can weather life storms more easily. And then about the therapist, if you had a therapist that got defensive, unfortunately, therapists are people too. We're not perfect. It's not a good look for them, but I understand sometimes, we step out of line and we don't realize that we did something or how it was perceived by a patient, because I also want to know that, like at least mention that it's possible that you were very sensitive to this. And they may not have meant it in the way that you took it. Sometimes there's like misinterpretations or miscommunications, but I'm proud of you for speaking up and letting them know. I would assume that it comes from the emotional neglect and isolation as a kid and feeling like you're already too sensitive or too much. That is a super big trigger for you. If you want to find a new therapist, you can, but I'd encourage you to go back to this therapist and work it out, because it's a great opportunity to work through something that you maybe didn't get the opportunity to as a kid, like a situation like this, and see that it can be okay. I know it's hard, but that's my advice. Okay. Moving on to question 4. It says, Kati, could you please explain why people itch when they're anxious? It's something I have recently started doing without even knowing it was related to my mental health. Could you please tell me why we do this and how we might be able to stop? Thank you. Love your videos and podcasts. Now, there was an add-on. I'll talk about both these. It says, why do I feel like I almost need to shake when I feel super anxious? Almost like I feel shivers down my back that force me to shake or shudder. I get so embarrassed if it happens in front of people, and I can't help but think it's a choice that I'm making and could stop it. Any tips? I feel crazy. Thank you for everything. Of course. Okay. Yes, both of these can come from anxiety. Now, the itching itself, I'm pulling this up because I had to do a little research, which is fun because I didn't know this off the top of my head, other than the fact that I know the shaking can be part of anxiety. However, the itching could be a couple of things. Number one, when it's attached to our anxiety, they call it a psychogenic itch. And it's essentially like the anxiety and the feeling of anxiousness doesn't come with a visible skin condition. Don't worry. The itching is frankly an overwhelm of our nervous system. Like our nervous system's kind of tingling and we just feel the need to itch. And that's what's known as a psychogenic itch, okay? It's because our body releases stress hormones like cortisol, and that can trigger the release of histamine. And if you don't know, histamine is what causes us to itch. It's like the thing that we usually try to suppress when we take an antihistamine, right? An anti-allergy pill. And so it causes itching sensations and we feel the need to itch and itch and itch, and it can almost feel like we can't itch it enough. And so let your doctor know if this is happening, because if we keep itching, we can cause other things to, we can break the skin and cause infection and all sorts of different things. Now, also along with this, that stress hormone, remember the cortisol, that was really interesting to me because stress hormones themselves can disrupt our skin's natural barrier, which leads to inflammation, which can then lead to increased sensitivity. And so that I found that to be very interesting too. So it's almost like stress and anxiety, which I feel run together a lot, can both affect our skin and our immune system as a whole and cause the itching to get worse. And so that's really why there's also research to show that when we have anxiety, it can exacerbate our eczema or psoriasis if we already have those existing conditions too. Now, moving right on to shaking. Yes, anxiety can cause shaking as well. I've heard from a lot of my patients that they feel almost like their body's betraying them because it does it automatically and it's like there's nothing we can do. Now, when we are anxious, obviously it releases stress hormones. We were just talking about that with itching. It also applies here where our body dumps a bunch of adrenaline and cortisol, and that can cause our body to go into fight flight, that fight, flight, freeze, fawn. We feel really overwhelmed. Our nervous system is firing very quickly. And all of that pumping of the adrenaline, the cortisol can make our body want to ready it to take action. And when there's no action to take, it can want to release that excess energy. It's like it's surging around in our system. And that's why we can have panic attacks. That's also why we can feel like short of breath and almost like we're going to pass out. It's like all this energy is coursing through our system really, really quickly and overwhelmingly. And then it needs an outlet. It needs a place to go. And we can almost convulse in a little bit, like, feel like we have to get it out. When we talk about somatic experiencing as a therapy, they talk about the fact that when they're doing that work with patients, they can just shake as they're talking through a trauma. And so I know that this isn't necessarily trauma connected, but it's anxiety connected. And I think in a lot of ways, our body tries to regulate, and that's your body trying to regulate. And yes, I know it's embarrassing, and I wish I had more advice on it, but that's kind of why it happens. And my best advice for both of you, for the itch and the shake, is that if we feel a little anxious, maybe it's every day. You're like, Katie, I fucking feel anxious every day. Whatever the case, or if it's every few days, whenever you feel that way and you kind of feel it building, or like, I feel a little off, or like, I'm starting to feel a little itch, I want you to do one of two things. Now, if you're in public, I want you to excuse yourself. I want you to go to the bathroom. I want you to go in, if it's a single, you can lock the door or go into your own stall. And I want you to shake out yourself. I want you to initiate that release. Instead of waiting for it to happen when we don't want it to happen, I want you to do it. You could even, if you can't get away, you could pretend if you have pants on, like something's in your, shake your leg out a little and be like, something's tickling me in there. You shake it out. You're fine. You can just say that to someone. I just feel like there's a tickle hair in my pant or something, do a little shake. You'll feel better. Trust me. And however you can make space to do that, let's do that. The second thing that if you're not, maybe if you're out in public, if you're a lady and you wear makeup or a guy, you wear makeup, this could be not something you can do in public, but I want you to put your face in some cold water. And the reason that we do that is if we dunk our face in like ice water or cold water, it makes us go, and that gasping for air in triggers what's known as like the diving reflex, and it stimulates our vagus nerve and it can calm our nervous system down. It's like another way of regulating. And so those are the two that I believe will help you kind of take the edge off so that you don't feel like your body's doing it without your permission. Okay, let's move on to question number 5. Today's show is sponsored by Liquid IV. One of my favorite moments this summer was sitting outside with friends at golden hour, warm breeze, good laughs, just soaking it all in. But staying energized and hydrated in this heat, that's a whole thing. That's where Liquid IV comes in. Their new Arctic raspberry flavor is my go-to right now. It's cool, refreshing, and packed with everything your body actually needs to hydrate faster than water alone. What makes it so effective? Just one stick mixed with 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. It's powered by Live Hydroscience, which means you get a science-backed blend of electrolytes, 8 essential vitamins, and nutrients, all without any artificial sweeteners. It's also vegan, gluten-free, and non-GMO. I bring it on travel days, keep it in my bag for long walks, and honestly, it's a summer must-have. Squeeze the most out of your summer with Liquid IV. Tear, pour, live more. Go to liquidiv.com and use code Katie at checkout for 20% off your first order. That's liquidiv.com, code Katie. Okay, let's move on to question number 5. This question says, hey Katie, my question is about attachment regarding military life. Having a parent unavailable, but not by choice. I often hear you mention your dad being gone for work frequently when you were a child and how you believe that it has an effect on your upbringing, 100%. My dad was in the military for 25 years and was often gone during my childhood. Not for super long periods, maybe 4 months max. That's still long. But he left and returned so often that it felt really dysregulating. We moved 8 times and never stayed anywhere more than 2 years. That also affects you. Until he retired during my sophomore year of high school. In my family, emotions weren't really welcomed. That also affected you. If I got upset, I was sent to my room or told people were staring. Oh no. I remember crying alone, wishing someone would comfort me, but no one ever did. At the age of 6, I even remember holding my breath, hoping I'd die. Is that normal? No, that's definitely a trauma response to what all the things that were happening for you. That memory has stayed with me, and I now wonder if that moment was more significant than I realized or potentially worsened as I got older. Since then, I've struggled with depression, suicidal ideation, self-harm, anxiety, social anxiety, self-worth, people-pleasing, and OCD-like tendencies. Of course, everything felt very out of control. Your dad was gone. You had no control over that. You moved a lot. You had no control over that. You were told that your emotions were too much, so you had to control them. You couldn't just be and express how you wanted to express. So you're controlling in the ways that you can. I often feel like I'm being dramatic or selfish for struggling because nothing terrible ever happened to me. Your definition of terrible, I mean, it doesn't have to be terrible either. It can be a bunch of things. You had a bunch of things. Remember when we talk about trauma, that it can be like a wave, like this one big wave. Like I was in a car crash. I went to war. And this big wave comes in. I was physically abused. And that big wave can come and sweep you out, and you can develop PTSD-like symptoms or be traumatized. Or it can be a bunch of small waves. My dad's not there when I needed him. My mom told me not to cry. We moved all the time. I never really had a stable home or stable friends. All these waves keep hitting you and hitting you and hitting you. And you like can't get your footing, and it wipes you out just the same as one big wave would. Okay? I feel guilty resenting my parents when I know they did the best they could and gave me a better life than they had. Well, good for them for making it better than it was, but that doesn't mean that yours had to be amazing. And the best that parents could do, I know we say that a lot. They did the best they could. Of course, parents do the best they could. That doesn't mean that that was good or great or what we needed. And that doesn't mean we have to hate them either. Like, I love my dad, but I can also like aggressively believe that like him working away from home wasn't good for me or my brother or my mom. It was a really bad choice. But I love him, and I know he made the choice thinking that he needed to provide for us. And he did. He provided a great life. Like, we weren't wealthy by any means, but we definitely, I didn't like want for a ton of things. Like, I was taken care of. What a blessing. Thanks, Dad, right? I can thank him, and I can also be like, but that really fucking sucked. And I really wish he got this great job offer when I was younger, and he would have been like local, staying put. He didn't take it. And so, there's things like that. I can love him and also think that a choice he made was really a bad one, and it affected me. And I think it might be helpful for you to try to learn how to do that too. It's really hard for us to hold these, what feel like, I don't know, like if dissonance is the right word, but almost like these two thoughts can't coexist. We're like, these two things can't exist together, but I'm here to tell you they can. That like, I love my dad and I know that he did the best he could, but I think the job he chose was really shitty and it like fucked things up for my family. And those two things can exist. I know it feels like they can't, but they can. And we have to give ourselves space to hold them both, because that is where the healing is. That's where we're then able to say, oh yeah, my dad was in the military and I understand, I'm thankful for his service, but fuck, that was hard. And moving sucked. It was really shitty for me. It allows us to stop abandoning ourselves and our experience. It allows us to stop negating our emotional experience. It allows us to finally see ourselves and accept what took place for exactly what it was. Instead of making all of these concessions or trying to logic our way out of it, or be like, for me, I could be like, but my dad was trying to earn a good living and, he wanted to make sure that we were taken care of, and we really were. And that's amazing. Okay. Cool. But that doesn't mean that it also didn't fucking suck. Right. And so allowing you to see both allows both to exist when you used to only think that one could. So I really want to challenge you to do that. Okay. So sorry, I got off topic. Says I feel guilty resenting my parents when I know that they did the best that they could and gave me a better life than they had. But I also feel like I was emotionally neglected. 100% you were. And that this may be connected to how I feel today. So my question is, can a parent's frequent absence, not by choice, like being deployed or away for work, contribute to attachment wounds? 100%. Emotional dysregulation or trauma, even if there wasn't a single major traumatic event. Yes, I feel like I answered that. Can emotional neglect or invalidation, even subtle, like being sent to my room for crying, affect long-term mental health? You betcha. We start to form these beliefs around what's okay and not okay to express. And in your home, it wasn't okay to express your emotions. It wasn't okay to be sad. And what message does that send to you? What do we draw in our little blueprint of what life is supposed to look like? It's definitely not good for us. Says, can it affect our long-term self-worth or the way that I relate to others? 100%. Could these experiences be connected to my current struggles? And how do I stop feeling guilty or like I'm making this all up just to blame my parents? Thank you so much for all that you do. Your videos gave me courage to start therapy once I turned 18, and I'm so grateful. Oh, yay. I'm so proud of you. Wonderful. I'm glad I could be here. Now, yes, all of these experiences connect to your current struggles. And in order to stop feeling like this, like I said, the guilt, we're going to have to hold space for both things. My parents did the best that they could. Sorry, my nose is really itchy and I think it's allergies. That my parents did the best they could, and what the best they could was not very great. And I still feel like shit. And I love them and I appreciate them. And they gave me a much better life than they had, but it still fucking sucked. We can have both those things. And I encourage you to journal, or at least allow yourself the space to think about both of those things. And if you think one, like my parents did the best they could, I want you to balance that with one of like, but it was really hard for me and I felt terrible. And I remember being sent to my room for crying and that fucking sucked. We have to balance this out because they can both coexist. Because yes, it's affecting your mental health, your self-worth, the way you relate to others, attachment wounds, emotional dysregulation, all of this, because that's our blueprint for life. That's how we learn. Like you were never taught really how to emotionally regulate. You didn't have a mother or father who, when you cried, asked you about what was going on. So we learned how to verbally process emotions and then support and console you, like rubbing your back. Oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that. I'm here for you, so that you know that you can co-regulate with someone else. You never learned how to do that. So of course, now as an adult, you're like, the only thing I know is to like hide away and do it alone and feel worse about it. I have to lock myself away and cry. And then I don't know what to say to people. I don't know how to express my upset. And so I just sit with it and it feels kind of stuck inside of me. And that feels icky. That feels dysregulating. I encourage you to make space for both those things. I encourage you to start journaling about what's happening inside of you. And I really, really encourage you to tell your therapist about all this, which I'm sure you have. But start untangling. I think the space where you'll feel the most relief is in this emotional expression. And so I might encourage you to start journaling specifically about like, what would it look like to cry with someone? And what would be like in best case scenario, how would that go? And I don't know if you're able to cry in therapy. I would assume maybe not, but maybe, because it is private, and how that feels. And know that it will get better. We can heal these wounds. We can navigate it, but we have to be able to hold space for both, because we need to make space for you and your experience, because it's valid. It's not just, oh, they did the best they could. We need more. We need to be able to consider that other piece too. And that was really healing for me. And then a lot of it's like opposite action, like doing the thing that I don't want to do. Like I usually want to withdraw when I feel upset or hurt. And I've learned to like lean in and tell people about it. And God, I feel so much better. But is it super uncomfortable? Yes. I feel like I'm so queued up when I'm doing that. I'm like, oh, freaking out, but I do it anyway. And so just doing some of those things to push back against that blueprint that was given to you that's faulty. Okay. Hang in there. I hope that makes sense and was helpful. Moving on to question 6. It says, hey, Kati, I've been on my healing journey for the last 2 years in trauma therapy. Amazing. I'm so proud of you. I've worked a lot on myself with the big challenge of feeling my own feelings. That's so uncomfortable, but yes, I'm proud of you. I've learned to sit with my feelings and finally felt safe with my therapist. Amazing. I've set boundaries with family. Look at all these amazing things you've done. I've set boundaries with family, lost relationships, and even lost a pet during therapy. Oh, I'm so sorry. Now I'm taking a break from therapy and I feel a bit lost and I'm having an identity crisis. I'm going through a bit of grief. Is this normal? Yes. Our therapeutic relationship can be one of the most valuable and just impactful relationships that we can have. It can feel, I don't know, even for me, like I reflect back on some of my therapy and I'm like, God, that was so amazing. Like that relationship was really crucial for me during this time. And this really helped me grow in this kind of way or see myself in that way and acknowledge the pain I was going through, right? It can feel like this, like very raw part, this almost like that, in a movie, sometimes they cut to like a montage of them like getting it back together and then you see them getting ready and they apply for a job and they get it and bam, bam, the music is playing and they're doing better. That's like our therapy time. And sometimes it feels like this really special chunk of our life where we're like, wow, I really improved during this and I really felt like a better version of me. Look at all that you did. You learn to sit with your feelings and feel them. You felt safe with your therapist. You set boundaries with your family. You lost some relationships. You even lost a pet. And all that was managed with this therapist. It's that special time. Oh my God. And now it's not there. It doesn't mean that we couldn't get back to it, I would assume, because you're just taking a break. You can always start back up. But we miss it. And so I encourage you to write about in your journal, or at least think about, like, what's coming up for you. What is it that you're sad about? Why do you miss them so much? What was it about the relationship that made it so special? We don't have to ignore this and pretend that we don't feel sad. But a lot of times people want to be like, well, stay busy. Notice all the positive things. Focus on the good things you've done. Yeah, you should acknowledge that, but it doesn't mean that doesn't also leave room for us to be like, hey, I really wish this person was still in my life. I understand why they aren't. And I technically don't need therapy anymore right now, but I still miss them, because they were a big piece of my life. And if this continues to bother you and it gets like bigger and harder and overwhelming, I encourage you to go back to therapy and let your therapist know of this experience and tell them that you would like to have more of a like step down, or maybe take more stock of the work you've done together. That can really help put some more closure to it. Or walk through all the things you've worked on and maybe a couple give you a little bit of homework to do as you titrate off. There's a lot of ways we can navigate it, but what you're experiencing is completely normal. You're just feeling a little bit lost without your, I don't know, kind of like your North Star. And so that's why we need to go inside and we could even do the, like, what would my therapist say? There's nothing unhealthy about that. As you're feeling like you're having this identity crisis, when we're making choices or trying to figure things out, we could say, what would my therapist say? And then we can probably figure it out from there. And that's a great touch point. So see if that kind of teases this out for you and helps you feel a little bit better. But it's normal to grieve it, okay? Final question number 7, is in relation to BPD and a favorite person. Now, if you aren't familiar with the term, an FP or a favorite person in BPD is when we kind of like idealize someone. We have a person in our life that, it's just like it sounds, like our favorite person. And we can kind of think that they can do no wrong. We put them on a pedestal and they can be like our main emotional connection. This relationship can be very, very valuable to us. And if we feel like it's threatened or that they're not going to show up for us in the way that we need, we can be incredibly reactive. Okay. And that's when we can kind of do that splitting behavior thing. Okay. And I have a whole video about FPs. If you wanted to watch for more, you can just search BPD favorite people, Kati Morton, probably, and it'll come up. But anyways, this question says, my old therapist is having a baby and I'll no longer be able to see her. She has been so helpful and I've been able to move on from her in the past when I graduated DBT. All of the therapists I've had since seeing her don't quite live up. It's possible that she's my favorite person. How do I move forward with my life? Thanks. I wouldn't say she's your favorite person since you haven't been seeing her. I know the person who asked this question, you haven't been seeing her regularly, and there hasn't been like this reactivity, because an FP, it just feels different to me. I don't know if anybody else agrees, but whenever I've had someone one of my patients with BPD, their FP is like, they have to be around them all the time. They have to like be talking to them all the time. It's like a constant, like, yes, they're on a pedestal, but it's like they also just need to have like constant contact. because you like rely heavily on them for emotional support and validation. And the fact that you haven't really been seeing her that regularly for a long time, I don't believe she's your favorite person. However, going back to question 6, when I was just answering it, she was incredibly valuable to you during a really tough time, and she was there for you when you needed her most. And so instead of seeing it as an FP, because it doesn't really matter. Either way, it's like we need to allow ourselves the opportunity to acknowledge the work that we did with her, why she was so amazing, why we really loved seeing her and having that relationship. All that was wonderful. And then we can be sad about the fact that she's no longer going to be part of our life. And at least the one nice thing is that you've kind of titrated down. And so you've had time to process from like the weekly or biweekly sessions to, every so often now. And so I really want to encourage you to focus on the work that you've done with her and then allow yourself the time to be sad and grieve it. And it would be helpful to write down some of the things that you liked about her, what you thought made her a good therapist, because the fact that you're like, all the therapists I've had since her don't quite live up, let's figure out how we can find someone that would. And we can't keep comparing one therapist to another. That's going to always lead us down a path of like, no one's as good as, like in my case, it'd be Rebecca. I loved Rebecca. No one's as good as Rebecca. Well, no one is Rebecca, so they're not going to be her. And that's what I really wanted. But I do know what I did like about her. And I found this other therapist, Josie, that I did like after the fact. And then Jana, you guys have heard of Jana. And they weren't Rebecca, but they were still good. And so I want you to try to figure out maybe some of the pieces of this old therapist that you liked and what made it feel really safe to connect to her. And then let's try to find that in the next therapist, knowing that they will never be her, but they can be still helpful for us in our process. Okay? Thank you all so much for listening and watching. Thank you for sharing this podcast and leaving reviews. It really does help. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Do your homework, and I'll see you next time.